Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the third in our Sporting Heritage Welsh Significance Programme webinars. For those of you who I've not met before, my name is Fran Stovold. I'm the Workforce Development Lead for Sporting Heritage, and I'm joined here by my colleague, Dr. Justine Reilly, who is one of our directors. We're a smaller group today, so hopefully we'll be able to chat quite a lot about everybody's collections as we go along. A little bit of housekeeping before we start. We are recording the session, so the light edit of this will be available about a week after the session, and I will put it up on our website and on our YouTube channel. I will send everybody a copy of the slide deck. Closed captions are enabled for this session, so if you need to toggle them on and off, they should be in your toolbar, which will either show at the bottom or along the side of your Zoom controls, and it's the CC in a little round square box. If anybody has problems with their internet connection and drops out for any reason, I will keep an eye on the waiting room and let people back in as we go along. And as I say, the recording will be there if there's anything that you missed. I think that summarises all our housekeeping before we get started. So today's session is all about how we can build our peer networks for the significance process. In our first two sessions, we covered the prep work you might need to do before you embark on your significance audit. So we focused on a collections review process. A fortnight ago, we looked at the actual significance audit itself. So this is sort of the next step on when you're thinking about planning your significance assessment and how we might build that network around you and your team, however big your team is. It could be a team of one, team of two, team of lots, but how you can build that network outside of your organisation so you can have those sense and balance checks on the work that you're doing. Justine, do you want to just, before I dive back into the slide deck, do you want to just give us a little bit of a background to the Welsh Significance Project as a whole?
Yes, thanks, Fran, and hello, everybody. Yes, so this significance programme has come from Welsh Government funding activity where we were piloting, looking at how do we look at sports collections, predominantly in museums, but also because we're the subject specialist network for sport, how could we use that model to help sporting collections wherever they may be, whether they be a national governing body of sport, whether they be in a club or within a museum or archive, wherever really. So that process allowed us to look at what are the key issues around measuring significance? How do we support organisations to be able to feel comfortable and confident to do that? And then we developed a template to allow all of the different organisations who may want to go through it to do that. And there are two different reasons why that's important. For us, it's important for the organisations themselves to be able to understand the significance of their collections. And that's kind of just a snapshot in time. So it's not that you have to know that significance now and that's it. It's understanding as much where the gaps are and feeling comfortable and confident to do that and know that you might not have all the answers and that's okay. So supporting organisations to understand that and have some case studies to do that. But then for us as the sector support and subject specialist network organisation, to be able to understand more about the collections that exist, more about any of the issues that you're all facing, and to be able to point to what are the significance of your collections and why they're so important. So for us, that kind of model and that pilot programme that we delivered last year, and now we're in the second stage now, was really crucial in understanding how to develop that model, but then also how to roll it out. And this series of webinars is that next stage so that you don't need to have us to facilitate it. If you want to go through the significance programme, you can do it yourself. So with those suite of resources and then alongside these webinars, which people are coming to live but can also watch pre-recorded, hopefully that will help people be able to do that themselves fairly straightforwardly. So that's the background and why we're all here.
Lovely, thanks, Justine. I think it's really important. I think as collection holders, whether you sit within the traditional sort of museums, archives, libraries sort of structure, or whether you sit within a club or within a community group, sometimes there is that weight of expectation that you should know everything about your collection. And actually, I think there's been quite a shift in thinking in recent years that there's that acknowledgement that you can't possibly know everything about your collection. It's a life's work to care and manage and build that knowledge, and a lot of it will sit outside of the immediate organisation that you work with. And the significance audit process, along with the collection review one that we started with in our first webinar, is a great opportunity to map out where some of those pockets of knowledge might sit, who you might want to bring in, both possibly in the short term, medium term and long term, to build that collection knowledge so that you're forever moving that understanding of your collection forwards. Right, I'm going to dive into the slide deck and we will start working our way through. We will pause for questions as we go through. So if you have any questions, you can either pop them in the chat or we can stop at various points. There will be a couple of discussion points. So it'd be great, since there were quite a small and intimate group this morning, to talk in detail about the collections that you look after or the areas in which you work. So there will be points for that as well. In today's session, by the end of it, in our hour, so we only have a short amount of time, in our hour, our aim is to understand the role of the peer reviewer, to understand who can be a peer reviewer for your collection, and to understand how to identify peer reviewers that meet the needs of your organisation. So hopefully we will cover that all within this next hour. So Justine's already given us a background to the significance process within sporting heritage. There is a broader sporting significance toolkit that was commissioned by the Welsh Government, which is available on that top hyperlink. All the documents that support the sporting heritage processes are on the second hyperlink there and are sat within our sporting heritage toolkit, which is worth exploring if you've not had a look at that. It's the home of all our best practice resources and guidelines drawn from across the heritage and voluntary and community sectors about caring and supporting and sharing your sporting heritage. And for those who sit within the museums hierarchy, all of our work sits and complies with the Museums Association Code of Ethics. Now, we're currently in our second round of supporting museums to go through the significance process. Our first pilot project worked with 3 museums here, and you can read the project report that I've hyperlinked there. Justine, do you just want to say a quick few words about the difference between each of those 3 museums that went through the pilot?
Yes, so we specifically chose 3 different types of museums. So one was a sport-specific museum, so had lots of subjects knowledge about the sport from volunteers and from the people that were working within the museum. One was a local authority museum that had a sports club. So although within the local authority museum they didn't have the subject specific knowledge so much, although they did still understand and know the collection well, but they had a really, really close link with the club whose collection it was, and the archivist was part of the audit process. And then the final one, so that one was Torfan Museum, and the Welsh Museum of Welsh Cricket was the one that was about the sport specific. And then Swansea Museum had a very broad collection of maybe about 20 plus sports, all of different types. So some quite in-depth collections of those sports, and some just very, very broad, without any subject knowledge of those sporting collections at all, or links that already existed, which, as we move forward and talk about the peer review, each of those then had its own challenge in terms of the peer review stage. So yeah, I'll talk about that later.
Lovely, thanks, Justine. Yes, we'll definitely be picking up sort of the challenges for depending on where you are within your organisation. So, things to consider before you start. Timing. Now, timing is key when you're thinking about building your peer review network. I know that it may make sense to think about the building your peer review network when you're doing the overall planning for your significance audit process, if you're able to do that. It may be that you want to wait till you've had your sit-down meeting, your first initial 2-hour meeting, which we talked about in webinar 2, where you actually go through as a team all the different lenses that you can look at as part of the audit process, work out where your gaps are, and then identify your peer review potentials at that point. So when you know your gaps, you know where you need extra input, but you may already know some of that right from the beginning. So you need to choose when the timing is right for you, but how you identify your peer reviewers will be dependent on the knowledge that you have at the time that you sit down to do your significance audit. When contacting and planning who will be your peer reviewers, it's really important, as we know, we're all pulled in lots of different directions with lots of different responsibilities. Quite often caring for a collection and particularly undertaking a process like the significance audit will be one role or responsibility alongside lots of others, and it will be the same for your peer reviewers or people who you approach to peer review. So if you know what your time frame is going to be, it's always good to allow that and share that with your potential peer reviewers, saying we're about to embark on our significance audit, we're looking for peer reviewers, we're thinking we will go out for peer review in this month. You know, would you be willing to be a peer reviewer, and do you have availability at that time? And existing contacts. This will depend on who you have within your team or who you have within your immediate sort of support network within your organisation or club. You may look at who could be in that original initial 2-hour meeting, which forms sort of the heart of that initial significance audit process. You may have, for example, Justine talked about the archivist who was involved with the pilot project at Torvine. If you have 2 people who care for the archive, it may be worth only involving one in your initial meeting and using the other archivist as a peer reviewer, so they can come in and sort of be the checks and balances. So it's thinking strategically about who you involve in that initial meeting, and then who would work well for you as a peer reviewer, whether they're sort of one step away from your organisation or whether they're somebody completely external and a new link. So it's sort of thinking about all these things when you're planning that initial significance audit process and where you want to start contacting your peer reviewers. So the benefits of getting your assessment reviewed. A peer reviewer will bring fresh eyes and a different perspective, particularly if they are only got a link to your organisation but don't actually work within it. Sometimes, or work even just working within a different department, they will have a different perspective on your collection, and that's what you're looking for in your peer reviews. They have the role of a critical friend. So they're not coming in to criticise or point out what you've done wrong. They're there to add value and to look at and work through the comments and decisions you've made and make suggestions, and have you thought about it like this, and have you thought about the flip side of some of the comments and decisions you've made. So they're there to be that critical friend, that supportive addition to your team. They will add relevance and authority, and hopefully comments will allow you as an organisation to feel more confident about using the statement that you end up with at the end, your final finished written up significance statement. And then finally, particularly if you go for peer reviewers who are completely external to your organisation, there are opportunities for new partnerships and learning. Or if you work within a large organisation, there may be parts of the organisation that you've not worked with before. So it's opportunities to develop new links, meet new people. So looking in a little bit more detail about the role of the peer reviewer themselves, so building on what we've just spoken about, they will provide further insight and context. As part of that 2-hour meeting you have with your team for the initial significance and audit, you will provide your peer reviewer with the context for your collection. But if you bring somebody new in, hopefully they will be able to add to that, give you different ideas, different angles, different facts, different stats maybe, and fill in gaps. They will comment on your draft significance statement that you will have drafted as a team, but they will add their own knowledge. So their role is twofold. So they will comment on what you've already provided, but also bring their own knowledge and understanding to your collection and its context. As I say, they will highlight hopefully what is missing and opportunities available that maybe you weren't aware of, or that you were aware of but didn't see where they linked or hadn't necessarily assigned as much relevance or importance to them. They may come in and say, well, actually it is important because of A, B, and C. And hopefully their comments, in combination with the comments that you've made as a team, will deepen your understanding for your collection's relevance. And that is what we're hoping will come across in your finished significance statement that you can then use within your organisation as a lever for funding with different partners. So that will be the sort of solid basis to really shout about your collection. So looking at who can be a peer reviewer, The simple answer is anyone. And I know that sounds really, easy to say, but it's anyone who has a knowledge or understanding of your sport, your heritage, the local context, linked possibly people who've played in your sport or have been influential within your sport. There's no sort of real limit on who can actually come in and be your peer reviewer, as long as you think they can add something to your collection knowledge and understanding. What you will need to think about when you're identifying your peer reviewers is that they will vary themselves in their ability to engage. So we already talked about making sure that you're clear in your time frames, so that when you approach your peer reviewers, you can give them the opportunity to say whether they've got capacity to do it. It may be that you identify a fantastic peer reviewer, but if they're off on an international book tour, for example, or are touring with a team that they're doing some research on, then they are not going to be the right person for you at this time. So it's working out that capacity and availability of people as you identify them as peer reviewers. Some may feel that they're only able to peer review your significance statement if they're able to come and see the collection, and we'll talk about this a little bit later in the session. And that may be something you're able to provide, or it might not be, or maybe it's a discussion to see how you can meet in the middle. You can understand that if your peer reviewer is not, or they don't feel sufficiently familiar with their collection, they may feel to do a decent job for you, that they want to actually come and see your physical items. And for some organisations, that's easier than others. I know with the collection at Swansea, which was many sports within that larger local authority collection, it was much harder to get out lots and lots of items, not only because there were so many, but due to the capacity of the team. Whereas if you're at the Museum of Welsh Cricket, where you're a sports specific museum, it's much easier because your whole collection and displays and store are just the cricket. That's not to say that they don't have other challenges along the way, but it's just thinking about, if your peer reviewer comes back and says that, how do you sort of bridge that gap? Also, quite often, because a lot of the people you'll be approaching to peer review your collections may not have been a peer reviewer before, so you're asking them to do something new. And so therefore they will have varying degrees of confidence around doing that. It may be that if you're asking somebody who is doesn't necessarily have a heritage background, or doesn't feel that they know your particular part of the sport in depth, they may lack in confidence. But it's being clear from your part what you're asking of them, just in the same way that, as we started this session saying, that it's impossible as a collection holder to know everything about the sport. You're not expecting your peer reviewers to come in and be the all-seeing authority on your sport. You're asking them to add their personal knowledge and experience and perspective to the work that you're doing, so that you're building that sort of consolidated view. And hopefully that will build their confidence, and you can have a discussion about how that partnership will work. So this is an opportunity for us to have a chat about this. So I'm going to pause the slide deck in a moment. So as we sort of touched on already, what you know about your collection will shape who you choose to be your peer reviewer. You may decide that you want somebody who has a little bit more in-depth sporting knowledge about your collection to come in and be a peer reviewer. If you identify in your 2-hour meeting, when you're planning that 2-hour meeting, that you actually lack sporting knowledge at that stage, we would recommend you bring somebody in at that stage, and don't just leave it all to the peer reviewer. Otherwise you're giving them a lot of hard work to do, a lot of legwork. But if there are particular areas of your sport or particular time frames within your sport you think, I wish we knew a little bit more about when the team went and did this, or we'd like to know more when they were playing at this ground, or when the sport changed, and whether it's kit, equipment, rules, we know somebody who knows particularly about that, they would make a very good peer reviewer to bring in that sort of knowledge. So I'm going to pause the slide deck now so that we can just have a chat about what you know about your collections and how this will influence who you would like to have as a peer reviewer. So you're welcome to switch cameras on if you would like to. You're welcome to stay cameras off. I know that we've got rugby football. I know that we've got basketball with Teresa. Lynn, what sort of collection do you look after?
Hockey.
Hockey, did you say?
Yes.
Ah, okay. So we've got a good spread of sports. So looking at what we've talked about so far, what I know it's hard to sort of be put on the spot because I'm asking you what you know about your collections, but do you know where the gaps in your knowledge around your collections are? And do you have thinking in that sort of way, do you know who you, even if you don't know who that individual person is, but the sort of person you would like to come in and be your peer reviewer? Has anybody got any suggestions?
Yes and no. I mean, sometimes we don't know we've got gaps. Because, yeah.
And it might be that as you're going through the process of the significance audit, that's where you pick up what those gaps are. And that's where you can define at that point, okay, there might be some gaps. And also, if you'll probably have specific people that you already know understand your collection or understand the history of your sport or the history of your club. And you think, actually, we need to involve them because they've got that broader understanding of it. And then they may pick up the gaps as well. I think what we found with the peer reviewers so far is that as well as them being able to kind of say, yes, we agree with the statements and the things that people have said here, that all makes sense. I think they've also said, actually, you've missed something here. This was more important and more significant than you thought it was. Or there's something missing here from the collection. It would be really lovely to see you explore that in the future. And I think that's if the peer review works well, then that happens. But sometimes you get that from, we kind of look at maybe sort of 4 or 5 in terms of the peer reviewers, and sometimes you get that across the board, and that's why you have quite a few, so that you're getting that breadth. Sorry, I'll stop for a minute.
No. It's so good. And yes, I hadn't touched on that. Yes, ideally, we would recommend you have 4 or 5 people peer reviewing your collection so that you can have all those different sort of voices and perspectives coming in. And also, as Justine was saying, you can then see trends in their comments, because it may be that they all pick up on something that's similar, or they all, sort of overlap or suggest different things. So you can then triangulate that with the comments that you made as a team. Has anybody else, Teresa or Hannah, thought about where you're? Yeah, hi, Teresa.
Hello, hi, it's me again.
Welcome back.
Lovely to be here. Lovely to be here. Yes, I was just thinking. So, I think we probably have a reasonable idea of gaps, because some of the identifiers for knowing about gaps comes from the inquiries that we get. So, if we get inquiries and we think, oh, actually, we haven't got anything on that, so that's quite a useful pointer. In terms of peer reviewers and helping them identify, I think it's with basketball, you've got quite a wide range of types of peer reviewer that we could possibly look at. So because we are in the university, we actually have, students that are learning about basketball as well as playing it. We are always trying to involve students to use the basketball collection for, say, their dissertations, or for hopefully, more PhD research, which would be brilliant. So I think these are the different kind of foci that the different peer reviewers would bring. One of the other things I was thinking about was we already have a collection management policy. So if you are bringing in peer reviewers, they kind of need to have an understanding of the collection management policy, because they might say some things that are, one area that I'm thinking about particularly, I'm sure it's true with other sports as well, is we're still not entirely sure how to create this boundary between, we are stating that we're the national basketball heritage collection, but in actual fact, lots of the material ends up being international. And so we're trying to kind of, how do we draw that distinction? Where do we stop collecting? Because there are obviously, as FIBA in Switzerland, there are other places that have brilliant international collections. We don't need to be replicating that. So I think having peer reviewers in to help define boundaries is a really useful thing as well. I still don't really know who we would ask yet, but this is why I'm here.
Well, hopefully the discussions we'll have today will spark some of those possible connections that you can make. But I think that's two really great points. You know, the not necessarily you're having all the information to respond to inquiries is a great way to map gaps in your collection. I work in a museum outside of Sporting Heritage where we do that, and then we try and plug those gaps by contacting different researchers so that we can fill it for the next time that somebody asks us. The other way is thinking about not necessarily thinking about the gaps, but thinking about people that you might contact, is looking at, you know, prolific donors that you've had in the past. So if you've had large swathes of your collection, which is, I think, is quite common, that somebody will suddenly, you know, say that, you know, my family relative has passed away, or they are looking to pass on their collection, and you get, you know, a whole library or archive or box of kit and equipment that has come in from one person. It may be that they, with a bit of, you know, discussion, they may make a good peer reviewer, because if they've got that engagement with the sport, it may be that that's if you've got those records. But you're right, within your collecting policy, you need to definitely have some boundaries around it. And yes, that international aspect will be, must be hard to rope in. I mean, we talk about it in some of our network meetings, that you can't, particularly when you've got team sports, there's always two sides, isn't there? So if you're playing internationally, then it's really hard.
Exactly. And you sort of think, well, and also if the materials in, we have made a kind of decision that we won't collect material that isn't in English. So because we did have a lot of material that's been donated that's in Spanish, and so we're not going to necessarily carry on collecting that. I think the prolific donor idea, that's a really good idea. Sadly, a lot of our donations do come in from the relative of the person who has actually died. So sometimes, you know, that wouldn't always work. And then quite often they're quite elderly. So again, that wouldn't necessarily work. But not all of them are like that. Some of them are, you know, still with us, thankfully, and up for it. So, you know, I'm sure that's a good route to think about.
I think that's the challenge across the heritage sector as a whole, to encourage collection holders to pass on their collections while they are still with us, so that they can share their knowledge, so that it's not always a posthumous donation. Because we were talking about it in another session not long ago, when the collection is the further the collection moves from the original donor or the original person whose collection it was, you lose a little bit of information at every step. So the more sort of distance there is, people wise, organization wise, you're losing all those little bits of knowledge along the way, which is only natural. You know, it happens with the passing of time. But if collection holders can pass things on when they're still alive, you've got that better opportunity to capture that knowledge, and then in this context go back and use them as a peer reviewer. Justine, were you going to jump in and say something?
Well, I mean, all of those brilliant points. I was just going to pick up on the potential as community engagement as peer review, and we did that in a couple of, I think it was Torfine that did it, and there's a similar thing happening in this round, looking at who the community of users may be who've got that knowledge of the collections, and this is particularly important, I think, when it's maybe a location collection, but I think it applies to any, to be fair. And I think you definitely were noticing that there in terms of your student cohort. They'll have that knowledge, that understanding of the collections and the sport themselves. You know, is there a route to putting something out on a newsletter that goes out to basketball enthusiasts who understand, just to kind of get their input in that, even if it's not a formalized peer review in the same way, but saying, this is where we think we are. Do you have any input? And getting that input from them. But organisations that have got either community consult groups that they already use or are wanting to develop that, they use the significance audit and the peer review process to do that, so that they could start to build those links and go, this is where we are. What do you think? And it also helped with that local knowledge. So the development of the town, for example, as sport developed, and people had that kind of wider knowledge that often wasn't about the sport, but it was about how that sport impacted on all of those wider parts to do with the locality. So I just wanted to pick up on that, really, that can be really important, but it can also help to foster those future partnerships and relationships as you develop the collection.
And I think that that's as relevant across basketball as it is across hockey and rugby, and you know the wider sort of ecosystem of sport. Just building on that, I always think that it might be worth speaking to the national governing bodies of sport and looking at their approach at delivering sport. I know that each national governing body normally has their strategy, which is quite often heavily predicated towards encouraging participation, but they also will be looking at how they cut across different agendas. So they have examples of how your sports, not necessarily, you know, obviously strategies are looking forward, but they'll say, you know, in this particular time frame in the 80s, this is what the strategy was, and these are the areas that did particularly well developing, you know, community participation in your particular sport, and this is the person who ran the program. I know when we did the scoping project with Paddle Sport UK as part of the consultation, so it wasn't strictly a significance audit, but we were looking at the potential that the collection had, and a collection that was spread across the whole of the UK. I spoke to a number of people at different levels who had been involved in training canoeists and paddle sports people, both at grassroots, at regional, national and international level, and they were all based in different places, so all had different stories to tell. And you know, looking at back, they all would have made great peer reviewers because they would have brought in different elements.
I think as well, Fran, that that point around the governing bodies, because we definitely used that a couple of times. If in your initial part where you're identifying what's the reason for the significance audit, why are you doing it, if one of those reasons is advocacy and demonstrating why your collection's important on that wider scale, often that advocacy is back to the governing body as well. So if you're involving them at that peer review, even if they don't actually then deliver your peer review, which a couple of them didn't, even though they were asked, you're making them aware that this is happening, this is this collection, this is what it talks about, this is why it's important. So I think it's always worth building that partnership and relationship with them at whatever point you can, so they know you're there. And I think that applies to all sports, but particularly applies if you've got a national collection, I think.
Do you have links with your national governing body at all, Teresa?
We do, but not particularly strong at the moment. I think it's an area that's being developed. So because with basketball, it's changed quite a bit. The governing body, the way it has, I'm not entirely sure of how it's changed, but I know that it's changed. Basketball England was something else, and I'm not sure of the actual trajectory of how it's changed. So, and I know we had quite a lot of their material was actually donated to us, but it's something that we're picking up on. So, but certainly it's a fantastic idea to have a look at the strategies and how they've changed. I mean, but as I say, it's not a clear picture because I think there were two different bodies at one point and they have really similar names, and I'm not sure what's happened. So I'm going to have to, that's something I need to absolutely look at because we don't have enough of a strong link with that. But we did recently have someone from Basketball England got in touch with us and came up to Worcester, and we met with them and we had an opening event for a display cabinet, which was basketball, and they're very keen to work with us again in the future. So I think that we're literally on the cusp of moving that into exactly. So
and it may, I mean, you could use your significance audit and this peer review role as that sort of the glue that strengthens that relationship, to say exactly what you've just said. We know that you have changed as an organisation. We don't feel that maybe it's reflected in our collection as strongly as it could be. Could you come in and peer review what we have and the collection as a whole and tell us where there are gaps? And can, you know, and then they are the perfect organisation to then help you fill those gaps as well. So you've got sort of almost the perfect circle if they're happy to come in and do that role for you.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Hannah or Lynn, is there anything else you would like to chat about before we move on?
No, thanks.
Lovely. Okay. Oh, Hannah, sorry, I moved on before giving you an opportunity to say anything.
Oh, that's all right. Sorry. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
I agree with everything that Teresa was saying. Actually, a lot of points brought up that I hadn't really thought about regarding the like identifying the gaps in your collection. So from our perspective, as a big football club, we have quite a lot of people that we could reach out to that are experts in the club itself. We have official, unofficial historians of the club as well. So we have quite a few people that I can think of that I could reach out to in that aspect. But I think one of the things that we'd need to work on is we can become quite insular at times. So we're just looking at sort of like our club in the surrounding area of Glasgow that we're in, but it's more them tying that back to the sort of national Scottish football and then further British football as well. So I think it's about trying to find people that could help us in that way.
Yes, it's looking beyond your existing network of people.
Yeah.
You've had there's been big development at Rangers, hasn't there? That I know you've had a new museum in the last 3, 4, 5 years.
Yes, it was about, I think we're coming up on 3 years open.
Yeah, so sort of just post-COVID, wasn't it? So
yeah. And that was really the first big heritage thing that we actually did at the club. So sorry, forgive my voice. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment. It was the first thing. So we sort of did everything a bit backwards because there wasn't anyone at the club before myself and my previous colleague that was a sort of heritage person. So it was, we thought we'll just go straight in and build a museum, bring in the other people to do that. And then afterwards you're sort of going, okay, well, we need to do the stuff we should have done to start with. So yeah, we have a lot of expertise in the knowledge of the club itself and the history. It's just the rest of it that we're sort of trying to figure out.
Yes, it's mapping. Yeah, so maybe it's an exercise to sit down and map where those extra little bits of knowledge that you want to, and then looking beyond, your existing sort of contacts.
Yeah, exactly.
To build those peer reviewers. Right.
Yeah.
I should jump back into the slide deck. I mean, I think everybody's very envious that you managed to jump in and do a museum before.
Yeah, I'm not going to complain about that, but
no,
it does leave you afterwards going, okay, well, we need to actually have policies and things in place that we don't. So
you can write those as you go along.
Exactly.
Yeah, the museum. Well, I remember when the museum opened, it looked fantastic. So, right. Anyway, we digress. I should jump back into the slide deck. So we've touched on some of the people here that we could approach as peer reviewers. Actually, the top one we haven't talked about, which is university. Mind you, Teresa, I know you're based in a university, but university contacts. Sporting Heritage recently ran an event at Heritage Quay with a whole range of sporting academics looking at how Sporting Heritage sort of practitioners can partner more with academics, and we have very good links across sort of the university and academic world. So if you're stuck for links, please do come and chat to us. We've talked about sports clubs and national governing bodies. It may be that if you're looking at the impact across your local area, that somebody from a local history society may be appropriate, or a civic society. Private collectors and private researchers, quite often absolute fonts of knowledge, and their collections and their resources will quite often sit outside of the clubs or sit tangential to the clubs and tangential to maybe your collection, but they could be a really important group of people to bring in. Many authors have written on sports. Community officers we've touched on, museum staff, archive staff. If you're in a club setup rather than a museum setup, there may be somebody within that traditional heritage structure who has knowledge that could bring fresh pairs of eyes to your significance statement. If you do get stuck, or you know the sort of person that you would like to contact but can't quite identify them, there is support out there. Obviously, we would always say, please come and talk to us at Sporting Heritage. This programme, because it's supported and funded by the Welsh Government, we would always recommend that anybody based in Wales would go through the Museums Federation in Wales. They've got a very well-connected network. Across the whole of the UK, there are 50+ subject specialist networks. So if there are particular aspects of your collection that you would like to delve into more, say, for example, you had an art collection or a textile element in your collection that you wanted to explore more, there are all sorts of specialist networks that could help and bring additional information in there. If you have trouble contacting them again, we can help you with that as we sit within that network of subject specialists. And then again, if you're within that museum hierarchy, you can go through the Museum Development Network, which runs, well, it's supported by Arts Council England, so I'm not sure it extends up to Scotland, but there you can go through Museums Galleries Scotland for their network and there is a similar network in Northern Ireland, and it's the Museums Fed in Wales. So there are always people you can contact and say, can I just pick your brains? I'm looking for somebody like this who can tell me about my sport. And it may be that they can come up and broker that relationship that fills the gap in your peer reviewers. So this was a great comment that came back from Emma at Swansea when they were doing their peer review. They really valued the fact that they'd had this outside perspective come in, because when you work closely with a collection and you work with it day to day, sometimes it's hard to take that step back and think critically about it and to remain sort of objective about it. So having somebody come in from the outside meant that they were, as she's put it, not just marking their own homework. So we've talked about who your peer reviewers could be, what you want your peer reviewers to do. I thought we'd just spend the last sort of just over 15 minutes just recapping what your peer reviewer will actually do for you, the actual process. So we're going to look at what you need to provide for each of your peer reviewers, what they will do, and then your final actions will be when you get their peer review comments coming back. So you will need to provide the background and context to your collection. So in all the linked paperwork, which I'll send the link out again with this webinar, but it's on one of those earlier slides. It's the second link on one of those slides, where the link to the Sporting Heritage Measuring Significance Toolkit. All the paperwork will be there, and when you write your significance statement, you put in a significant chunk of information around the background and context to your collection. That will be vital for your peer reviewer. They may know your sport, but they won't know necessarily your collection. And the two things are different. So for them to feel confident to come in and review your collection, that information is vital. The draft significance statement that you would have written in your 2-hour meeting with your team. Your significance matrix, it's useful for them to see that as well, so they can see some of your workings and some of your sort of thought processes. And then any other supporting information you have. And you may want to prep some of this before you actually start the whole significance process. It may be that you have some of this already existing. So it's any list of your collection, any database you have on your collection, whether you use a museum or heritage specific one. Photographs. Now, we don't expect everybody to have their collection photographed, you know, every item, unless you've had the opportunity to do that. That's quite unusual. But if you've got photographs of key items or particular details that would allow your peer reviewer to gain extra knowledge about the quality of things in your collection, and then anything else that's appropriate. So you may say, oh, well, actually, we've got this fantastic leaflet or pamphlet or a short film about the collection or about the sport, and that sport is really well reflected, or that element of the sport is really well reflected in our collection, or we have, you know, the player's kit from the match that this film is from. It may be that you want to provide that as well. We always recommend, going back to that idea of timing that we touched on right at the beginning, that you provide everything in a timely and efficient way, and also be prepared to answer any questions, because you're sort of giving your peer reviewer this huge amount of information. It's only natural that they may have questions either about the process or about elements of your collection. So it's the beginning of a discussion or a dialogue, even though you are asking them to produce this bit of work independently. You'll get the best out of it if you can support your peer reviewer through the process. So just as a recap, this is the statement framework that you will complete in your 2-hour initial meeting. This is the form that then goes to your peer reviewer. So it will have all the significance statement things that you've developed in the left-hand blank column, and then your peer reviewer will put their comments in on the right-hand side. Going back to one of those ideas that we talked about at the beginning, allowing your peer reviewers access to your collection. Now, our next session is all about setting up a virtual visit to your collection. So I won't give any spoilers, but just things to think about that may come back from peer reviewers, and thinking about what you are able to provide as an organisation. Can you offer an in-person visit? Are you allowed to have people on site? Not all organisations can. Not all organisations have the capacity to allow people on site. So it's thinking about what you're able to do and being very clear about it to your peer reviewer. Are you able to allow access to your full collection? Is it easier for you to get out highlights? And by highlights, I don't necessarily mean, you know, the most famous or the best quality things from your collection. It may be that your peer reviewer says, I want to know a little bit more about this area of your collection. Could you get me out 2 or 3 items that reflect this match, this particular period, these players? Or I can't quite tell the quality or the significance of something. I just need to see it. And, you know, they may request other items as well that they have particular interests in. Can you set up a virtual visit? And as I say, no spoilers, you'll have to come to the next session to find out more about that. But we will talk about the logistical and technical ways to set up a virtual visit and sort of different ways to do it on different budgets. You may be able to send short videos or photographs showing details. It may be that you could do a short video around if your collection is on display, around your galleries, so that you know, like a filmed guided tour for your peer reviewer. Good practice if you haven't done it already, but that may be really valuable for them, particularly if they are not geographically close to you and can't manage an in-person video but want to have that greater knowledge and understanding of your collection. Or if you're not comfortable or able to make videos, it may be that you can send, you know, a raft of photographs, you know, if you don't already have them within your collection listing, or it may be that you want to send photographs showing how individual items in your collection are displayed and linked together currently. So as I say, your peer reviewer won't necessarily know your collection, but if you can put things in place that will enable them to have a better understanding of it, they will spot significance in items that won't necessarily be obvious to you. Some they will know probably from their overall experience and knowledge. Some will come from actually talking to you and seeing items from your collection. So enabling that access is really important. So I'm going to stop the slide deck again in a minute, and we've got just over 10 minutes to go. I have a few finishing slides for us to look through, but I thought we'd just pause and just see how we feel about how this might work in your workplace. Before I do that, Justine, do you just want to talk about the peer review network session that's coming up?
Yes. So we're trying to develop a kind of structure so that if people are looking for peer reviewers and are trying to work out who could do that, we've already got a network in place. Now, I'm not sure how easy this is going to be, so we're giving it a go to trial it and see if we can make it work. And it may be that network becomes lots of people who've already done the significance process themselves, also people who have got knowledge and expertise and are interested in it. But the whole aim of it is to help people be trained so they understand what a peer review entails if they've not done that before. So it's quite straightforward, so that we've got a list of people so that we can just easily go, oh, okay, you're looking for somebody who can do this. Actually, that person may be able to help. And that it basically just makes things a lot more straightforward when you're coming to this part of the process. As I said, this is a pilot, so we're just starting to work out what does that look like, and whether that network becomes just something that happens online, whether there's an online group for it, whether it just becomes a listing. We're not sure yet, but that's the aim of it. And we obviously have the peer reviewer training coming up as well. So that will be available online for anybody who wants to be a peer reviewer. So if you've got somebody who wants to do it but isn't quite sure, then you can direct them to that, but also to the peer review network if they want any extra support or anybody else that they want to discuss with. So I'm hoping that makes sense.
Lovely, thanks, Justine. Right, I'm going to stop the slide deck so we can just have a few minutes chat. So we've sort of gone through the whole process of thinking about the role of the peer reviewer, identifying them, how they might add context and knowledge to your collection and to your significance audit, what you will then be asking them to do, the access that you might need to provide to your collection, and a little bit of sort of dialogue while they're completing their review. What we haven't touched on, Justine, is in the paperwork, we only say that peer reviewers should really be looking at a couple of hours of time to go through the significance statement. Is that right? Yeah,
because when we do also suggest a fee of about sort of £25, which is a nominal fee. But we also know that organisations don't always have that amount of money. They don't always have the ability to pay peer reviewers. But because essentially you're asking somebody to volunteer their time to do it. And I think that's something that, as you're working out who is your peer reviewer going to be, you need to be considering, actually, is this person probably going to be doing it as part of their role, so they're already paid to do it, or are they doing this as a volunteer? Does that sit okay with you as an organisation for that to happen? Does it sit okay with them? And that you need to have that discussion of what does that look like in terms of, asking people, based on the fact that some people may only be asked to peer review once for one collection, but I know that I've already asked 2 people to peer review a couple of different collections because they've got that really wide breadth of knowledge. Now, they happen to be in a role, so they're paid in their role, but this is still additional. There's still additional work they're being asked to deliver. So it's just considering that that you're not asking people to spend too much time on it, and you're being really clear with them what that looks like. So it's easier for them to say, yep, I can do it, or no, I can't. And if you feel that needs to have some remuneration, I can't even say that word with it.
It's acknowledging their time and their experience, isn't it? So we've been through that sort of whole process, and my final few slides that I'll end on after we've had our chat will just sort of finish that process off. But do you feel, from what we've talked about, I know an hour is a whistle-stop tour to get you thinking about this, and I hope that there are some little sparks in there that will allow you to think about who might be your peer reviewers, and hopefully give you ideas that weren't already on your radar. Does it seem like a workable model for you? Is there any other support to develop your peer review network that you think that either we could provide or that you would need from somebody else within your sport or your organisation that we could, help broker? Putting everybody on the spot now.
It might be as well that you just need to take it away and think about, because we were talking about this earlier, the first couple of sessions around collections management and significance, a lot of people may be thinking, oh yeah, we might do that. But I think when we get to, this is kind of like the sort of really crux part of it, I'm going to do it, so I need to know who our peer reviewer is going to be, because that's the bit that makes it meaningful in terms of what you get. It's all really important, even if you didn't do the peer reviewer part, but it is the bit that makes the difference, I think, particularly if you're advocating or if you're going for funding, to have that broader kind of understanding that it's not just been the organisation saying, this is what we think. It's got that real kind of meaningful information behind it. But therefore that makes it quite tricky. But I suppose what I would say is building that peer review network for the significance process isn't just a one-off. It's kind of, you're building that network as a longer term kind of support structure, I guess, that you may dip in and out every year or so, or you may suddenly find that you've got a new partner who's working with you all the time. And I guess it's that way to look at it. But yeah, you're probably going to need a bit of time to think about, what does that look like?
Shall I be kind and not put anybody on the spot? Unless, Teresa, do jump in. Yes.
I was just going to say, in terms of this idea that your peer review network isn't a one-off, it just made me think that actually we have a committee already in place for R1, and they're almost like that because they comprise people from different sectors. We've got some from the English Basketball Fellowship who are all either retired, well, they're all retired, but they're either ex-players or coaches or referees. So they've got fantastic, and I've just suddenly thought, actually, in effect, they are peer reviewers because they already give us advice and thoughts and point out things that, should be done, perhaps, to increase coverage or whatever. We did have a student on that committee. We've got a lecturer on that committee. So, in a way, we're quite well set up already with a kind of nascent, they wouldn't be the same people because we'd want more than that, or different people. It might be just good.
But that'll also help as well in terms of directing you of, well, actually, these people here you should speak to. Yeah, they'll help you do it.
So that's all that was making me think of. And then the other point I was going to say about the remuneration, because it's something I hadn't actually thought about. even though one should. And I think part of the reason I hadn't thought about it is because people are so passionate about wanting to help, actually. In this sort of area, it's, you know, it's not always true, is it, with all voluntary setups, but with sporting heritage, they're also passionate about the game, that they're often quite willing to do it for nothing. However, I do really think that's an important point about acknowledging their time and their expertise. You know, I mean, so we did a little event the other week, which was a kind of a lunch event, and we invited all these people to come, who have been, a lot of them have been involved with the setting up of the basketball collection. And it was kind of a thank you. And they were the ones, the English Basketball Fellowship had actually provided the money to buy the display cabinet. So it was a kind of thank you for that. So, you know, there are ways, I mean, yes, it cost a bit. You've got to think about that, I know. And I don't know about other organisations and what amount of money they have available. But that event was so special. They all really loved it. People had come together. They hadn't come together for about 10 years. It was only a 2-hour event, and it was so good. And the feedback we had was so good. It was wonderful. And we got further, you know, connections because of it. So it's just thinking differently, isn't it, I suppose, about what you can do. And what people value, what people love to do. And it depends very much on the demographic, I know, but, you know, anyway.
One of those things you have to judge, isn't it? Yes, because you want to pull on people's passion for their sport, but you also want to acknowledge and thank it. And if it could, like you say, it could be an event to say thank you, but it could be financial remuneration. And only you within your organisation can judge that, but it's making sure that, as Justine was saying, if you want to build these relationships going forward, you want everybody to feel happy and on board and feel that their time and their experience is acknowledged and recognised. Right, I'm just going to jump into the final few slides on our slide deck because I'm conscious of the time. So talking about building networks going forward, Sarah at Torvine, as part of her feedback, asked to be put in touch on a more long-term basis with one of her peer reviewers because they wanted to look at talking to them about support around their refurbishment and collections development. So it is that idea that a peer review relationship can develop into something more. And I know that one of their peer reviewers was the World Rugby Museum at Twickenham, and they came across an item that they weren't aware was in the Torvine collection and have now requested it as a loan as part of their exhibition. So it's been a mutually beneficial relationship, which hopefully will come out of your peer review relationships as well. So just to bring us towards the end, let me just move the slide deck on. So once you've received your peer reviewers' comments, your project lead will reconvene your steering group, so those that sat down for the initial meeting, discuss all the comments and agree on an amalgamation between your team comments and your peer reviewers' comments. You can list all your peer review comments in this form, which is part of the raft of paperwork that comes with all the significance process. And then you can amalgamate it in your final significance statement. Then you will have your statement that is a moment in time with the people that you involved. As we said in our second webinar, it's one of those documents that you may wish to revisit as your collection knowledge grows and evolves, as your collection grows and evolves, and as more people get involved, or different combinations of people get involved in your heritage organisation or within your sport. So, but your collection, your significance statement, once you've had it peer reviewed, is the snapshot of that work at that moment, and that hopefully that will then be something that as an organisation you're confident to use in, whether it's in your policies and procedures like forward plans, in grant applications, just sharing it with those who are involved in your sport to say, look how proud we are, look at how relevant and important our sport is. We'll come back to questions in a moment. As I mentioned, our next session, which is in a fortnight's time, will be looking at creating a virtual visit to your sporting collection. And then our final session towards the end of March will be for those who are interested in being a peer reviewer themselves and how to go about doing the peer review process. So it'll be the flip side of this session. All the recordings are available on our website and on the YouTube channel. And when I send the slide deck, all of those links should take you to the right pages. The first 2 are up there at the moment, and it will take me about a week to edit and turn this session around. All of the paperwork that we've referred to during the session is within our Sporting Heritage Toolkit under the Measuring Significance section, and that is the link to it. And if you're not already following us, please follow us through our Sporting Heritage newsletter or follow us across our socials. And I think that brings us to an end there. So are there any final comments that anybody would like to add in before we bring things to a close? Justine, anything you would like to add that we've not covered?
I don't think so. And you've done exceptionally well within time. So
We're 1 minute over. We're 1 minute over. Well, I hope that was useful. And once you start your significance process, whether it is this week, this month, next year, do let us know how you get on, because we are still gathering feedback. You've got 3 museums going through the process at the moment again. So we're in sort of the second iteration that we're supporting with a bit of facilitation within sort of the Welsh cohort of museums. But obviously you are both based outside of Wales. So if you do go through the process, we would be really interested to hear how you're going on. And if we can provide support along the way, do let us know. So thank you for your time today, and I hope you have a good rest of your Wednesday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.